Right. So in attendance for Sandown South, we have Mark Voller for the Liberal Democrats, Pauline Evans from the Ireland Independent Network, and Robert Thompson for Labour. And I have just explained what we're doing and forgot to press record, but I think everyone knows by now. We can add a note.
Before you start, Chris, do we need to say who we are?
Your names are on the screen.
Okay.
But yes, I would say, hi, my name is Baba, and take it from there. So we have drawn lots to start, so off we go. All yours.
Hi, I'm Mark Voller. I'm standing as a Liberal Democrat candidate for Sandown South in the Isle of Wight Council election this year. I've lived in the town since 1989, and I can recall when it was a popular, thriving holiday resort, popular with people of all generations. We had the bucket and spade type holidays for families. We had large numbers of older people coming on coaches, staying in our hotels. And it was also a popular town, as I recall, for nightclubbing, nightlife in general. And those three things perhaps were incongruent, inconsistent, but somehow the town rubbed along well. And it's also a popular town to live, a very large residential area too. As I'm finding out as I go around delivering leaflets to many more thousands of houses than I ever knew existed. So my first step as a candidate was to ask people what they think, to conduct a survey and to find out what are the issues that are important to people living locally. And I've had a number of kind responses to that too. And it's very clear to me that most people living in Sandown like the town, they love the town, and they want it to do well. But they're also disappointed in aspects of our town. They see the signs of decay and deterioration that have happened over the last couple of decades. They see the dilapidated buildings, the hotels that are falling down or have burned down. And they want to see that change. They want to see these things improved because it's depressing. And I think many people would like to know that the council are onto this, that they understand these issues, and that even if they can't wave this magic wand to make all these sites, to restore all these sites immediately, at least they'd like to know somebody's working on it, something is being done. So there is perhaps a lack of transparency and feedback that upsets people. So what are the issues and what can I address as a councillor? I can't promise the earth, of course, but I do believe that we need to work to protect the green spaces, the remaining green spaces in our town. We need to protect the heritage buildings, and we need to work finally to put right some of these dilapidated sites around the town. So I'll stop there because I've got a long list, but all of that needs to be affordable, of course.
Well, just a point of clarification, as you have been walking the area, where is the boundary between Sandown North and Sandown South?
Well, it's a strange town because I always think it divides east and west, but I really don't understand what the boundaries of my own ward. I would say Station Avenue is within the residential part of the town, but then it also divides by the railway line. So anything west of the railway line is also in Sandown South.
Right.
So Prome Way, that kind of area, Sandown South, but Station Avenue within the town. So anything north or south of that, really.
Right. I know there was some confusion. I saw on Sandown Hub, somebody put a leaflet through the wrong.
It's very easy to make make I think.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Pauline, I think you came in second. You're muted, Pauline.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. Off you go.
Thank you. Well, I came to the Isle of Wight on the first experience I had was when I was a very small girl, I was about 5 or 6. Thought it was another country, of course, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And then as I got older and became an adult, I visited more and more often. Been here since 2009. And last year we moved to Shanklin, but my heart is still in Sandown. I feel very passionately about Sandown and the demise of Sandown over the last couple of decades, as Mark mentioned. I think the people of Sandown are amazing. The community are amazing. And I want to do some justice to the people who pay handsomely the council tax that is not utilised in a fair and deserving way. So my idea is to, and initially I was incensed into saying, what can I do? What can be done about changing something? I don't want to be whining about it and have nothing to do about the change. So I got in touch with somebody in our island, and it went from there. And so I have a passion that hopefully will be justified and honoured to the people in Sandown. The main thing is to re-motivate people, because it's very demoralising paying that council tax and seeing the community around you go into decline. And there is a strong community that I know will all pitch in when they know it's for the greater good and worth it. So my impetus really to be involved in politics, local politics, and the community is based on all of these beautiful buildings and the amount of tourism that we could have, and everybody be proud of their surroundings.
Very good. Thank you, Pauline. Robert, don't forget to unmute.
I know I've just finished. First of all, my name's Robert Thompson. I've been on the island since 1996. I'm married. My wife, we met at Reading University, and she was from the island. I worked in teaching. My first career post was in 1989. And I've worked in Milton Keynes, Reading, Portsmouth, Hampshire, and had some time, a really very happy time at Cowes High School on the Isle of Wight from 96 for about 15 years. Then I moved to Christ the King College, and then I've retired from teaching nearly 3 years ago. It's really nice to hear Pauline and Mark why I want to get involved. I'm fairly new to politics. I joined the Labour Party and got involved, and I found myself in this position because I'm irritated with myself that I complain too much, and I think no, it's time to do something. So I come from a position now of having had a career of nurturing, helping, supporting, being a public servant. I have an inherent need to go and try and do the same thing and deploy those skills of listening, helping, finding solutions if possible, but also at the same time trying to think structurally, economically, so that we're not just left off on the edges as local councillors. I think it's very easy for us to get isolated and feel quite powerless. And somebody's asked me already, said, so what do you actually do? What's the difference going to be what if you get elected? What would be the difference? And I said, well, it's a voice. It's democracy, and the fact that we're all on here, we're working with you, Chris, to promote democracy is ultimately it. I'm a humble person as a member of our community, and I love Sandown, and I run fairly regularly down there every week, and you see the potential, and the potential is enormous. The people are great, so that's why I'm here, and I'm sure we'll enjoy our discussion. But it's lovely to speak.
Thank you, Robert. Just to reiterate, because I made a mess of the introduction, 2 other candidates were invited but haven't turned up. They are Ian Ward for the Conservatives and Jenny Hicks, Island Independent Network. Pauline is standing for our island. It doesn't actually show on the screener, so I'll just reiterate. Pauline is our island. Mark is Liberal Democrat and Robert is Labour. I know those do show, certainly Robert's does, so just to reiterate on that side. Right, Pauline, you're going to start off with the questions. I'll try and remember to go around in a fair order. So we'll put that to one side and we'll go. I'll read the questions twice, give you a bit of thinking time. Do you have specific projects in mind that you would pursue on the council? So do you have specific projects in mind that you would pursue on the council?
Yes, I have quite a few actually. But
what we could do is keep the Sandown, particularly Sandown specific ones, for later. So if we talk about island-wide ones, is that okay?
Yeah, yeah. What I would like to see is an island-based community hub for volunteers, for not just communities and the social aspects, but for businesses as well. There's lots and lots of businesses, whether they're private or public, that really could do with a helping hand now and again. And I think the idea of having support, extended support for the community activities would probably be enhanced by a community volunteer hub, where somebody might only need some help for a couple of weeks of the year, but they can go to that one place. And I'm really trying not to use the word one-stop shop because it's flogged to death and I don't like it. But in essence, one place that somebody can go to get some volunteers on a permanent basis or a temporary basis, and that volunteering will go towards their CV and help towards obtaining a job and just to gain new life experiences.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I've got a list of things, but I'll be brief, and I don't have the money to pay for them, so I've got to be careful what I kind of promise. Something that matters to me, and isn't necessarily Liberal Democrat policy, although I know a lot of people within my party would probably share the view, is that we really need to make our town centres safer, less traffic dominated, and I would be specific. And I would speed limit.
Right, Mark, we lost you there for about 10 seconds there.
Do you have me now? Am I there?
Got you back now, but we just missed that.
Excellent. Well, I was saying that I really think, we need to make our town centres safer. If we're going to revive them and we're going to regenerate them, we've got to have them safe. And I believe that in our town centres across the island, 30 mile an hour is too fast for traffic going past people. So where people and traffic mix, I do believe lower speeds are appropriate. And I think many people would agree with me, even if they don't want a war on the motorist, and I'm not after a war on the motorist because I am one too, but I do think that we've really got to think about pedestrian safety if we're going to make our high streets appealing and attractive, and if we're going to regenerate them. So that's an issue that I care about personally, and I would work on, and I believe it's something that applies across the island. In particular, it applies in Sandown, but I also see Newport High Street too as an issue.
There is some traffic calming in Sandown. Pauline Way has traffic calming. Does it not have a 20 mile an hour speed limit in places along there? And certainly the green lanes have 20 mile an hour speed limits.
You're right, and there's traffic. There's 20 in the Esplanade area too. I'd just like to see it extended around the whole area where people gather. And without going on about it, but I do believe that this is something quite basic. It could be done. It wouldn't cost a lot of money. The council has spent literally millions, £9 million or so, rejigging junctions around the island for cars. I'd just like to see a small portion of that spent on making our town centres safer.
I don't know about the others of you. I've not heard any objections to traffic calming. I've not heard anybody say it's making it go too slow. Yes, I've heard about road closures. I think we're all well aware of those. But traffic calming doesn't seem to be an issue that upsets people. I think that would be fair. So I think there would be support for that. Robert.
Okay. I'll answer your question, but I always notice that my average speed on my car driving around the island, it always says 21 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Well, so there you go. the question, answer the question, what specifically will we do? Part of the Labour policy is to introduce 1 hour free car parking and abolish post 6 p.m. as charges. As part of a strategy to regenerate town cars coming into town. But then you're always up against that. There's the challenge there again, and I think it's interesting that Mark brings that up about how, yes, the car, it's a great thing and it gives us all of those liberties. But I think to develop the change in car parking policy for Labour would also be to look at pedestrianising elements, and also within that, the regeneration of high streets is the Labour Party has a local investment strategy which is based on principles in Preston, Norwich, and Southampton that's managed to keep money in the local community rather than it being invested outside of the community, and to hold it in and therefore be able to regenerate high streets as part of that package.
Okay, good. I think I've asked all three of you, though, that question. So, Robert, it's back to you again, as you've had a little bit of a break on that one. Adult education on the island is limited. What would you do to encourage organisations on the island to provide opportunities in this area? So, adult education on the island is limited. That's what the public tell us. Anyway, this is one of the public questions. What would you do to encourage organisations on the island to provide opportunities in this sphere, in this area?
That's a really great question. Long-term, lifelong learning is what we are all about. We have to be like, you never stop. And I can't remember the piece of data. There's something, this current generation is expected to change careers is something like, I don't know, 15, 20 times during their lifetimes. I was very lucky. I had a career for a long time and came into that kind of career. The Isle of Wight College, evening schools, I think is a vital part. And that's something that isn't necessarily proactive and strong at the moment. I think sixth form provision on the island, I've got to say, has been bad. I went through the reorganisation of schools and I don't think that worked. I don't think there was a coherent strategy on that. So what would I do, what would the Labour Party do, is to provide a network of opportunities for relearning, reskilling, upskilling as the economy changes and becomes flexible. But that has to be provided through higher education, through tertiary education. Another thing that this is a personal thing for me, there are opportunities for people to do degrees from here. The Open University is a wonderful sort of late 60s Harold Wilson invention where people can do it and mix and balance. And I have one qualification in there from them whilst I was full-time education, teaching and having a young family. And it was amazing because I could do it whenever I liked. It was fantastic. I think those opportunities, and a university opportunity on the island, you can do degrees through Platform One here in music. I know that, and they're linked with Chichester, I believe. There are other opportunities, but a coherent education strategy around linking with universities, university provision. We've just been through the COVID, and a lot of students have done a lot of online distance learning, and that speed of people's understanding of how you can learn online, I don't think it ever replaces one-to-one, I'll be honest on that one. But I genuinely think looking at how university provision for the island or an outreach or a university hub would help not only retraining people, but would generate an income.
Okay. Come to all three of you, thinking of much older people, I'm thinking of the University of Third Age, G3A areas. I think probably that's what the question was looking at, more at the all adults in the sense of 18-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 25-year-olds, but also people at very much the other end of the age spectrum, 50, 60, 70 sort of line. If you want to have a quick comment on that, as I've thrown that in as a possibility, making places available for U3A sections to work with.
U3A is my understanding of it is very active, and I would imagine it's just a question of broadening its profile, because I certainly know my parents are both here. They're very active in classical education. They go to numerous singing things, history things. It seems to have a very strong community, and in terms of promoting it, maybe that's something we could do through the council, is to say, it's here, look at it, it's here, it's available. And it's that stimulation that just drives people to being lifelong learners.
Because, I mean, there used to be evening classes, there used to be WEA, things like that, which in many places have just pretty much ceased to exist. You know, the schools used to be full of people doing it. I mean, my wife did. She did, remember at college, was doing woodwork at the local school. That was cost her 20 pence or so for the material, something really ridiculous like that. So, Mark, would you like to take this one on?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, like Robert, I fully support the idea of lifelong learning, and I myself got an Open University degree in the 2000s, and I'm very proud of it. And I think a lot of people go through school, they even go through uni and college, and maybe don't give as much as they should to their studies, and only later in life, perhaps when they're working, do they realize what they've missed, and then they're quite happy sometimes to pay to do it all again and do it properly. And I think that's a good thing. Whether or not it's for the council to provide the opportunities or the funding, that's another question, or whether the council can afford to do these things. Our council does have an adult community learning programme, and it does provide some courses at Westridge, I believe, some of which are free, and some of which there is support for. And a lot of those courses are to do with ICT. But I fully support the idea of extending that program where possible. Now we're coming through the COVID, hopefully coming through the COVID period, it ought to be possible to provide more direct learning experiences for people. And I can also sing about a Liberal Democrat policy here, because of course their lifelong learning policy is to provide every adult with £10,000 over their lifetime to access to pay for education. So I think it's a great policy. I'd like to see that sort of thing implemented locally. And finally, I'd say about libraries as well, because they feed into this process of lifelong learning. And what a shame that the current council are cutting library services, library opening times, cutting the mobile library service, you know, because this is, through reading, people do acquire learning, and that doesn't necessarily cost an individual a lot of money, and it's something a council can do and do well.
Perhaps we'll talk about Sandown Library later on, have a chat about them when we talk about facilities. Pauline.
I know that the industry is a very large one for adult education. I'm one of the baby boomers that are currently flourishing in life, and I went to university in 2013, 14 and 15 and did it the other way around. I had my family first, and then I did the uni thing. But what I would like to see is there's no reason why we can't have some kind of university on the island, and that is incorporated with an innovation incubation hub, where we could perhaps have business mentors from current businesses and business owners and entrepreneurs that can almost adopt somebody that they could mentor and help with the setting up process and developing their business, and even entering into the exiting strategy for businesses later on. So I would like to see that, and also what I mentioned earlier on with the Volcom, the voluntary community, they would very much be able to tie in with that as well, and assist the businesses and the people that are learning and helping to grow their own businesses. And also for young people that maybe need extra support, I would like to support, and our island would like to support younger people that would perhaps have missed the opportunity in their young formative years, and they need extra support for maybe in funding to go to university or go to any vocational, it's not all academic, but go to vocational learning to learn a skill, and they haven't got that money to do it. So I would be interested in helping them with either a charity that's already existing, or along the lines of giving them some financial help towards retraining, especially if they're over the age of 19 and they don't qualify for any funding from the government.
Mm-hmm. You think the funding's available at the county council to effectively give out either their grants or loans? What you have in mind there?
Yeah, well, any extra help is always welcomed. So even if there's funding locally from local government, I think, you know, there's always charities and there's always support for extra funding towards people being helped to retrain or train initially.
Yeah.
So what I've mentioned with the community, with the business hub, and help to make that flow, especially with business mentoring as well, would generate quite a lot of activity with being more productive for and producing more people that are sort of encouraged to set up their own business or, you know, be employed because they've now got new skills.
Yeah, and people who are employed spend more money in the local economy as well. Robert, please.
I set up my own business 2.5 years ago, having never run a business. Having always been in the state sector, and set up a small independent record label. And the organisation that I found invaluable was the Chamber of Commerce, and a support programme for over 50 setting up their own businesses for the first time. That was extraordinary. I learned so much from that. But I gathered those schemes they're all dependent on funding for 2 years, 3 years, and then it goes and it stops, and then they're scrabbling around for funding again. And what struck me with all of that, in terms of, it's about being longer term, and a strategy which does, because there are people on all ages who are entrepreneurial and want to try and find a way to do it. But if you've never done it, it can be quite daunting. So those support structures coming from a collaboration with the private and public sector, but through the chamber, I found extraordinary.
Good. Okay, we're done with that topic. We're now going to come to a thorny one, which I'm sure is dear to all your heart, dear to all our hearts, indeed. Mark, I'm going to give you first go on this one, I think. We've had many questions pertaining to cross-Solent travel links, the ferries, reliability and costs. How would you address existing concerns, and do you have a vision for improved connectivity? So many questions pertaining to cross-Solent travel links, the ferries, reliability and the costs. How would you address existing concerns, and do you have a vision for improved connectivity?
I do. First of all, I've been appalled that the passenger services have not been running as they should through the COVID period. In my view, that should never have happened, and those vital links to the Isle of Wight should have been maintained, because many people have effectively felt cut off from the mainland through this period, unable to see their families, in many cases unable to get to work and back in a reasonable period. And I think that has been cruel, and our local politicians have been silent on the matter, and that has been unacceptable. And I'm pleased that some of the services are now being restored, although it remains to be seen to what extent. But that is something I think needs saying, and it's not acceptable that politicians have said nothing about it and done nothing about it. That said, for the future, there are some big issues about affordability of travel and the convenience of travel. And I do believe that it was a big mistake in the 1980s that when Sea-Link, for example, was privatized, that there were no regulatory provisions put in place to ensure minimum standards of service. That's been done. That's a national move and something that a council can't itself change, but the council can lobby for change. And I do believe there needs to be a regulatory framework in place. Of course, a regulatory framework won't necessarily guarantee really good services. It just means there'll be minimum standards, but at least we'll have that. And that's been sadly lacking recently. I suppose implicit in your question is, do I support a fixed link? I don't know. Is that implicit in your question?
There was a separate question on fixed link.
Okay.
We felt it was so divisive so Marmite that it could perhaps be the sort of question that electorate would hear it and say, oh, that's the views on that one. It's going to be a 10-year project minimum. There's whole issues around connectivity. What's it going to link to? Is it going to come through the New Forest? Is it going to go across Portsmouth somehow? Is it going to be... So we've tended to keep away from that one, but you're welcome to say
well,
a few words.
I think you've said it there in your explanation. You know, in essence, a fixed link won't happen and probably can't happen for a lot of reasons. And therefore, it's not worth talking about a fixed link. It is worth talking about getting the ferries regulated. That can be achieved. It won't necessarily cost anybody a lot of money, but it can achieve big things for the Isle of Wight, for our connectivity, and for the success of businesses and for tourism on the island. So I would say, let's lobby for change in that area. Let's stop talking about pie in the sky fixed links, and let's move towards getting the ferry companies to raise their standards, raise their game, or else be regulated.
Yeah. I mean, again, with a fixed link, you've got no control over how many people are coming over that link. You could get 30,000 cars decide to all turn up because nobody else is going. We'll go to the Isle of Wight for the day, and you just suddenly, let's say it's coming over from Hurst Castle to Yarmouth, for example, being the narrowest part where the big ships don't go. Yeah, how are you going to control that? Plus, there's the issue: does the island then become a suburb of Portsmouth or Southampton? So therefore, again, local people get squeezed. It's such a massive area, and as you say,
I think people in Portsmouth and Southampton will have something to say about being at the other end of a fixed link. I also, I mean, if I were to express a view on fixed links, I would say I would support a rail fixed link, but I really don't think it's ever going to happen. But if it did, yes, it could be a good thing, but there would need to be a sufficient modern railway network on this side for that to be viable, because it would cost billions to build this link.
Absolutely.
And there's no point linking to a decrepit network. So we've really got to have modern standards over here first, I would say.
Good. So again, Robert and Pauline, if you want to discuss bring in the fixed link, feel free to do so. Robert, would you like to give us your thoughts on cross-Solent travel?
Having been a commuter out of my teaching career whilst I've been here for three of those years, there were challenges at times. I think what we're back to is negotiating service level agreements, and I would agree with Mark on that one. Is that it's okay to have private ferry companies if the market does exist, and the plan was always, I guess, that it probably would reduce prices. It clearly hasn't done that. It's clearly prohibitive. It's discriminatory. If you're below a certain income, you can't even afford to get off or on. It's therefore a service level agreement within the context of privatised industries is necessary, and likewise for buses and for trains, which are also all in private hands. And I think I'm guessing that the nation has reached this point now that actually we were promised with privatising utilities that they would provide lower a better deal for the consumer. And it's been clear in so many industries that doesn't happen or hasn't happened. So I also have another vision. This is a personal one, is that I know that in the States, there are on the East Coast, I can't remember specifically where, but the ferry is funded from road tax. So in the same way the road tax would be, as it was, I guess, when Sea-Link was there, it was funded through a nationalised railway network. You get your ticket to ride and it goes via, it's the same thing. When we still got that legacy in place, but that's a longer term issue. I don't think we solve it. I'm going to stay away from the fixed link. Enjoy it.
That's wise. Pauline.
Well, briefly, I'm going to mention the fixed link. I'm wholly against it. This is a tiny, tiny island off of a slightly bigger island that can accommodate the cars. We would be overrun in, terms of volume of cars, and it would just be totally impractical. And also, it would spoil the essence of the island, which, because it is disconnected, it's slightly unspoiled, more so than the mainland. I think the private sector into the ferries is not really been good, because they're pricing some people out of the option to live here, to visit, or to live and commute. We have a business on the mainland, and it's very expensive to keep going backwards and forwards, you know, a couple of days a month. And there's there's fors and against of having a fixed links. I don't think it would work. It certainly wouldn't work. But I don't agree with the privatisation of the ferry companies. I think they are using it to their advantage. The prices are going up a couple of times a year, and it's just squeezing some options out of people. So yes, I think we should lobby for change, but it's not going to be an easy task. But at the moment, they have got the monopoly.
Yeah, I think a couple of points I'll pick up. I didn't write the question. My idea of connectivity is to be able to get on the train at Waterloo, the fast train, get off that train, walk down the ramp to the catamaran, get on the catamaran. The catamaran then takes me over to Ryde. Ryde, there's a train waiting, which takes me down to Sandown, or to Lake in our case, because that's where my brother-in-law lives. Now it seems to be the better route, if you don't want to wait, is to get a slow train from Victoria, which somehow seems to connect with the catamarans. And then when you get to the other side, you hope the train hasn't gone off. Happened to my wife a while back on the Sunday. There was her and probably about 20 or 30 other people got off the catamaran. As they got to get on, well, approached the train went off. They denied it. We challenged it. Said, no, it waited for all the... No, it didn't. It most definitely drove off. So they must have been trying to keep to a punctuality schedule by saying we have to leave at 2 minutes past the hour or whatever, instead of waiting for the customers to get on the damn thing. Yeah, the other thing about the island is surely you move to the island because it's an island, because it has a special air about it. It's a bit like people who move to the country and then complain the street lights aren't on, or that there isn't the regular bus service that they had when they were living in, I don't know, central London or Muswell Hill or wherever. Yeah, that's the nature of the place. That's the beauty of getting on that ferry. And when I brought friends across, I brought the Ramblers group across a few years ago, they just love it. The fact they are now on an island. I tend to get around the ferry fares by sailing. I have a boat, so I sail. I haven't paid White Link or Red Funnel anything recently. And obviously with COVID, my wife hasn't been able to come over either. So it's we kept that away from them. Okay. But yeah, fixed link, it's going to cost billions. Where is the payback in it? I can't see it. It's going to cost 30 quid a time, but you just open the floodgates. Right, let's get stuck into Sandown matters, because I think you're all on Sandown Hub. I'm sure you are. I'm sure we've all been involved in the discussions there. So let's talk about shops first of all. And the question was, I had it here a moment ago. What will you do to address all the empty shops in each town, or in Sandown will be specific? The main streets are dying. What should the council do to specifically address this issue? If you want to move into hotels as well, that's fine. I'm hacked off that my bank is no longer at 14 High Street that I joined all those years ago. But I have to go to Shankton if I want to visit somebody. Pauline, would you like to start us off on this one?
Well, I would like to see, obviously, the regeneration and not so many empty shops, and, you know, sort of pimp them up a little bit as well. At the moment, morale is quite low in Sandown, and, you know, for obvious reasons that we've already discussed. But I think the community are a fantastic bunch who will roll up their sleeves, and they will start, you know, prettifying the place when they've got that motivation to do so. There's no point going so far down the line to do that in terms of aesthetically making the high street look nicer, when all they're going to have is the next blow is, you know, to their businesses, and it's going to make the demoralisation even worse. The basics are, we need to get in place what we're going to do with the derelict stuff, And that then will, I mean, for instance, the Ocean Hotel, it's been empty and it's been dumped on, and it's been getting worse and worse for years. Now, the simple remedy for that, and I know that the shareholders are all interested in getting their money back, and they're all interested in not paying any money out in the meantime. But the simple solution for that, to start with, would have been to put some hoarding around it. It would have then made it safe, inaccessible. We could have got local artisans, local artists to come and graffiti it in a nice way with some nice murals or whatever. Then it would have been pleasant to walk past and look at. It would have been very simple, very very cost effective to have done that. Instead, we've had this big carbuncle to look at, to drive past. So, you know, it's sometimes thinking outside the box. And I know for sure the community would roll their sleeves up and help out with stuff like that on a temporary basis. But what we want to see is long-term solutions. And I think the solution would be to introduce a policy for the landowner, property owners, who just basically, for whatever reason, are sitting on the property, and then get the section 215 going and hit them in the wallet. Because, you know, there's nothing worse for a businessman or a property owner to be stung in the wallet as the consequence of letting it sitting there rotting and affecting thousands of people's lives, thousands of people's motivation and income, because the businesses now are starting to say, well, what's the point? What's the point when it looks like a ghetto?
It's a bit like empty houses, isn't it, in some ways, that people are sitting on houses which are empty, just waiting for the land to appreciate in value, or the properties, and that's no good for housing. People need places to live. So it's akin to that, isn't it, in many ways, as you say, penalising people for not doing something with that site, letting it get vandalised. You then get into the broken windows scenario where it brings the whole tone of the place down. Mark.
Hi, yeah, I agree actually with a lot of what Pauline said there, and I think a lot of people in Sandown would be reassured to a point if they thought just something was being done. And that might include putting hoardings around it. It might include a clear up of the rubbish. They know no magic wand can be waved. They know these buildings can't be wished away because they're privately owned. The council doesn't own them and it couldn't afford to buy them. No. So this is a question of making the landowners, or in this case of the Ocean Hotel, the administrators, face up to their responsibilities to tidy up the place and not to be a blight on the whole community. So I do agree that the powers that are available to the council, for example, the Section 215 Town and Country Planning Act power to clear up land, should be used where they can be used. The problem for a lot of residents of Sandown is they don't know what's being done, if anything's being done. There's no feedback from the council. I dare say there's an officer somewhere at County Hall or wherever in the planning department who's got a massive file on his or her desk and is working day and night to get this sorted. But we simply don't know, and we don't know what conversations are going on behind the scenes because nobody feeds back any information to give us a bit of reassurance. So my view is those powers should be used where they can be used and where it's not going to cost us too much money to do so. I'm also concerned, and this is a matter for the council or whoever gets elected, that we just don't have enough staff and enough resources put into dealing with these kind of issues. I did hear that we've only got 1.5 members of staff working on planning enforcement. I don't know if that's right, but if it is right, then clearly there's a wider issue for the council to address in terms of its budget. I believe the council that we have now has been too quick to write off some of our high streets. They've talked about Newport, for example, and saying, oh, let's convert to residential part of the town that was currently used for shops. I think it's too quick to say that. We've just had the COVID era when by law, effectively, shops have been required to close. People have been afraid to go out. Let's just give this a bit of time and see how things come back. My prediction would be It's not quite as gloomy as some people are saying. Not everybody wants to shop online. There will be a lot of people who want to get back out, socialize, and go to our town centres again. Let's make them safe. Let's do the things we've been talking about, the pedestrianisation, the lower speed limits, the better integration with public transport. Let's brighten these areas up where we can with some money, some grant funding if necessary, to put a bit of colour back into our town centres. Let's open them up for leisure and commerce and culture, not just cars. And I think we will start to see people come back to these places. And despite the horrible eyesores that we have, that we've talked about endlessly, I think in spite of those places, people will want to come back to places like Sandown. And but we must do everything we can to help to improve the look of the town. And I think that will give confidence to people.
I think there have been some changes. Certainly the first time I came to the island, there was the Lido, or it was a go-kart track or something at the end away from the pier before you get onto the Esplanade. And that always looked dreadful. And White City as well, which seemed to be an eyesore. I think there have been some improvements. The new Holiday Inn, Premier Inn, I forget what it is.
Getting a new Premier Inn, that's a good thing. And we're getting, you know, there are some good things. But I suspect we don't really want to talk about all the aircraft that landed safely, do we? We talk about the things that are still ongoing. And what makes them really upsetting for people is we think nothing's being done. If we could be reassured that somebody's on the case, that somebody gets it, and that some effort is being put into getting these things put right, I think a lot of the complaining voices would go away.
Robert, the floor is yours.
Wow, numerous. I agree with Mark and Pauline. I think this is a community-led, community-driven thing, but needing structural support right the way through. And were we to be elected onto the council and actually acquire any semblance of power or lobbying influence / lever, it would be to reinvest island money back on the island. There's £35 million, I gather, of island money which is invested in warehousing in Manchester, which gives us a return of a nominal amount. Come out of that, change that, get it structurally resorted, regenerate the high streets through grant provision, but also I'd love to look at the rents as well, because I'm fully aware that a lot of pension funds, as a rule, invested in high streets years ago, and there were a lot of rents for businesses that were, because it's a market again, what the market will sustain, and a lot of those pension funds would have high street shops which they'd lend to big chains, and then that has a big impact on smaller businesses. So I think we have to look structurally at how we can reduce rents on the high street. So that's one example. The other example that I've seen which is brilliant is in the Wirral up in Liverpool, where a very successful entrepreneur from that area came back and started buying up shops. I can't do this. It's not a council thing. This is just an anecdote and a story. I'm not suggesting that we go and find an entrepreneur to do it. But it's somebody whose heart lay in that town. They're buying up shops and they're renting them to artists, creatives at very low prices and generating a feel on the high street that's different. Another great example, I hope I'm not wrong in this, but I'd heard that there are organisations which normally wouldn't be on the high street are thinking of coming to the high street. So music colleges that might then set up in a high street in Newport. That's great. You suddenly go, hang on, it's here. So that then it gives you footfall, all this. So it's a different way of thinking. It's an ambitious way of thinking. What's gone before has failed. So let's not do the same again. Let's find something different. I remember when Rapa Nui was in Sandown. And I remember nipping in there for a cup of coffee and a look at a skate park inside a shop. And it fascinated me. It was great. And then they moved on and they went, I think it's cows, and they're now in freshwater. But it's those kind of organisations that were very successful, and T-Mill's now really successful, becoming pretty much global. You think, wow, there we go. We can do that. Let's do that. And it's opening up the thinking. But it can only come through structural change. Okay.
It's interesting in many ways how things haven't changed. I have a black and white photograph of my parents with tennis rackets in tennis gear, and they're at roughly where just looking at towards the library, where the trampolines are on the other side. And you can see the building behind them. It hasn't changed at all. It's exactly the same building. And I suspect tennis courts have presumably been improved since 1950 something or the other. But it's amazing how a lot of stuff doesn't change at all. That's going to bring me on to the other topic. So we're moving into that area. Browns, the golf course, pitch and putt, whatever we want to call it, and Dinosaur Island. That was raised specifically by one of the people in Sandown Hub as a question to ask. What are we going to do with Browns and Dinosaur Island? Pauline, would you like to give us some thoughts on that one?
Well, I always believe in if it's not broke, don't try and fix it. Browns probably was very successful and much loved already, and then the council, in their infinite wisdom, turned around and said, "Oh, it's not viable. We're going to close it, and we want to do something else." Nothing's been done with it, and they're offering a lease which has now been extended to October 22. Well, that's just the teething problems of a new business, starting up. You would have to go way beyond that for it to be worth anybody's effort and interest. I mean, for instance, when it was running and you had the campfire, and it was such a lovely community spirit, and the visitors loved it. Why did it end? I don't understand why it ended. It's all to do, I think it's all to do with funds. I do believe that the funds generated from our exorbitant council taxes are not disseminated in a fashion that is wholly conducive and economical. I think our island would be clever with cash, and would disseminate them funds in a fairer way so that there's not investment in the mainland. Why should there be investment in the mainland? We need the investment in the island, not the mainland. This is where the money comes from. The people living on the island. So I think it's quite a travesty, really, to take money from people that are working hard, proud people that give towards the council tax, and then take it and invest it somewhere else. I think it's absurd. I don't know whether it's a requirement for investment, and if there's spare money, that it has to be invested in what appears to be a high return investment. Whether they're constrained by the district auditor or something like that, I don't know, because it does seem a very, very curious decision to invest in property all that distance away. Just thinking about the Browns again, but thinking about the green aspect of it. I mean, that is a huge green outdoor space. We don't have anybody particularly who's green focused above everything else. How do we feel about that? What do you think, Pauline? Do you see it as being retained just for that, because it is a green outdoor space, a valuable outdoor space? Most definitely. Above and beyond anything, that green space should be preserved, because we don't want to see another concrete building going up. We don't want to see flats. We've got enough dinosaurs. And, we have got the biosphere element that we need to take into consideration. And we are part of the Jurassic, we have got an element of Jurassic coast here. And so that would be good to have an element of learning about the dinosaurs and what we've got and all the fossilization that we've got. But that wouldn't justify another plastic dinosaur out the front. And I just think that the green element is something that cannot be recreated once it's gone.
Yeah.
And for people to come, either islanders or visitors, it is a tranquil experience, a haven for people just to, it's that woosah moment where everybody just listens to the birds and listens to the peace and quiet. And we need that more than ever, as everybody's lives are getting more and more busy and more, there's many demands on everybody. And you go to somewhere like that and you think, You know, it's that our moment that we need to preserve, and not just for ourselves selfishly, but for the balance, for the balance of the birds and the trees, and you know, nature itself. We are squeezing them out.
Yeah. Robert, green, browns,
Greens,
Dinosaur Island,
yeah. Rename it
Yabberland
Greens,
area.
and we're in. We've all cracked it. It's the lease, isn't it? It's down to you know, you're never going to get someone to take it over with a short lease like that. No way. So it's a longer lease. A bit of pump priming to begin with, a bit of money up front, and also I think it brings us back to the Grand Hotel and the planning permission that was in there for 60 rooms, then down to 30, then that eyesore, that Grand Hotel edifice that has all the potential, but again is a victim of bizarre negotiations in the past. That's holding it back. That's stopping somebody coming and go, we'll get onto it. Then again, down the other end, you've got the bandstand, which has turned into something very successful down there. There's the well, I can never remember the name, the bouncy things where where your kids get in and they play and they run around. Thank you. Yeah, and that's great. And that's the for a seaside town, bucket and spade. Mark said earlier, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's where's my traditional bucket and spade? Down the Shanklin end, the dinosaur pitch and putt, crazy golf. Lovely, great, but it needs a level of investment, and you're not going to get a level of investor coming in without a longer term lease. I'll be quiet. I'll rest my case. Yeah, we're going to call it greens as well. Let's change it to greens.
Yeah, which I did inadvertently, I think. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, browns troubles me greatly, and my first position on this is to say I support protecting the green, open public spaces that we have in the town and keeping them accessible. So that's where I would start. And I'm very sad if we lose one of the few remaining green spaces in the town. It's become a popular area. It was never intended so much that the ex-boating lake would become haven for wildlife and a popular draw. I don't suppose anybody designed it that way, but that whole area has become well liked, and I think we'd be sad to lose it. But lose it we appear to be doing. And this is, we've talked about the dilapidated hotel sites, but this is of a different order because this change is happening at the hand of the council. The council, through their actions, have caused Browns to close. And they have a plan for that site. And it's a plan that will involve a lot of inward investment and hopefully for them regeneration, and will lead to paying off some massive bills that have been accrued by the Dinosaur Island project as well. Now, if anybody can unravel the detail of this, they're doing better than me, because I don't think anybody knows, and I've not yet met anybody in the town that knows what's going on and what's being negotiated, or why it's being negotiated, or who actually wanted this change to take place. But we're told that the council has a vision, that it has a prospective partner in this, and that there will be many millions of pounds of inward investment. And we're even told in a councillor's parting shot at his last cabinet meeting that this world-class theme park could open in April 2023. Well, I would gamble a fair portion of my pension that nothing is going to open in April 2023, if at all. But the council is doing something. It's got a plan. I only wish they would share with us what that plan is and not hide behind the commercial confidentiality that's so convenient at this time, just ahead of an election, and actually tell us what they're going to do. Whatever they do with that site, and for whatever reason, I only hope that they keep as much green space, habitat for wildlife, and public accessibility as possible. And if I get elected, I will apply myself to ensure that those commitments are held to.
I think the history of the boating lake was it was a bomb crater, wasn't it? I think there was munitions or some sort of assembly plant down there, because I believe my mother-in-law worked down there. My father-in-law was in the Home Guard during the war, and I think that has all come out from bomb damage.
The whole site has a huge history and heritage,
Yeah.
of course. I mean,
Yeah.
we've barely touched on it, but of course, the Brown site is not just a golf course; it's got a huge site, a huge historical interest. Our council, the Isle of Wight Council, has a long record of letting or neglecting, if you like, heritage and historic sites around the town. We've only got 12 listed buildings, and we can't even seem to protect them, the town hall being a recent example. So the approach of the council has been woeful, and we really need to turn that round.
Any other Sandown issues any of you would like to raise, just to mention? Pauline?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the Grand and the Ocean, I mean, I would like to see a CPO happening by now. If I was influential in the council, I would have strongly voted by now for a CPO, and the community should have the right to have compulsorily purchased it by now and turned it into a community venue for the arts, for music, for social gatherings, to build the infrastructure of the community. And I would like to see our island would like to see more local representation in planning from the grassroots up, so that local representation would be implementing what is done with these buildings, rather than it's all hush hush, nobody gets to hear about anything until it's too late, and that's not democracy.
Robert, any other Sandown issue you'd like to mention?
No.
Mark? No, you're on mute, Mark.
Not very good on mute. I think the only other thing that comes to mind, and it's a general point, but Sandown too, is enforcement of things. My background is in enforcement as an ex-police officer, so I look at these things and I think, well, you know, we're always cajoling the public to do things, you know, stop dropping litter, stop fly tipping, control your dog. And yet, you know, a lot of people they'll observe these messages, and there are plenty of volunteers who go out picking up litter after other people. Great, and I'm glad they do. They do a fantastic job. But the people who are dropping it should be held to account. Yeah. The people who disobey and disregard the rules, thinking someone else will clean up after them, should be held to account. I hear nothing from our council about how many people are being prosecuted or what decisive action is being taken. Yeah. I'm not talking about the culpability of any individual here, but I'm just saying there needs to be a regime in place, and people need to know that these things are being picked up on, just as they are in councils elsewhere. Why is our council not taking this enforcement action? Why, for example, do our parking wardens not have the powers to enforce these bylaws? We used to have wardens who were trained at public expense to go and do all these things, and then I believe they were all sacked to save money. So let's rethink this. Let's think about, instead of just cajoling the public and campaigns of encouragement, let's think about some enforcement, because I think that will drive home the message more than anything else.
Very good. Okay, so we come up to the wrap-up point. So, Robert, you were last on the introduction, so if you'd like to start us off on the extra, so to speak.
Okay. I'm going to read from the manifesto document. The island has suffered an income reduction of almost £90 million due to government funding cuts. We cannot just accept a constant loss of services while our council tax bills continue to go up by 5% this year. Island Labour has a bold and transformative vision for the island as we come out of the pandemic. We will build real wealth in our communities by spending more of our council budget on the island, employing island residents. By changing the way the council buys its goods and services, we'll keep £40 to £60 million of investment on the island in the same way Preston Council in Lancashire has reboosted its economy. Boosterism, but in a slightly different form.
Pauline.
I would like to see more open and honest consultation process with the community members. This island is built of many, many people, and I just think that the monopolisation of the decision making has been taken by just a very few people for the masses of people, and they have had to have the privilege of paying for it, and it's been paying for the decision that they didn't particularly want. And I think that's very, very unfair and has to stop. So our island is all about listening to people, having a good, fair and long enough process of consultation. 10 heads are better than one. 80,000 heads are better than 39. So the ideas will come from grassroots, and let's start to see some real change and progress happening with the island. And when the people are happy on the island, the visitors will be happy. There will be so much magnetism towards this island, it will be flourishing year on year.
Thank you, Pauline. Mark, you can have the last word, if you remember to unmute.
With the mute off. Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Actually, I think I'm very grateful for the chance to engage with voters' questions and to speak, because in the COVID era, it's been very difficult. We can't communicate through leaflets, and social media has a limited appeal for a lot of people. So it's great to be able to do this, and it's good to be up against some very able and articulate rival candidates as well. Sandown, who I hope to represent, is a great town. Most people know that, and we're positive about it. And there are many good things going on. Even the Conservative Council are getting some things right, actually, although they're not here to defend what they are doing. You know, they're doing some good things, but there's an awful lot that we can find fault with that make people unhappy. And that's where I would like to address my activities. And I know Liberal Democrats, the Liberal Democrat Party on the island, you know, is committed to making the changes where they are needed. And we have some very good candidates. Look at the example of Andrew Garrett over in Parkhurst, what a fine councillor. And we will all work in the way that Andrew does for our communities, listening to what people say, hearing the voice of people, and then acting. All of this, much more could be possible, I think, if the island had the kind of funding that it deserves. We haven't had the island deal that was promised, or at least strongly hinted at, just before the last general election. And I wonder how many island people went out and voted Conservative in the belief that some kind of deal had been agreed between Boris Johnson and politicians over here. No such deal has been promised. Yes, we've had some funding in dribs and drabs for different reasons, but none of that is ongoing, and none of it is based on the premise that we are an island with special issues and needs. So it is important that we get that kind of funding. Until we do, and even if we do, everything that we do must be affordable. And that means we can't just sit here, promise things and say, well, do this and do that. We're going to buy these buildings, we're going to CPO this or do that, without knowing that it's affordable for people through their council tax, which is rising far more than the kind of 2% that they claim as a headline. Actually, if you look at your council tax bill, it'll be a lot higher. So we have to bear that in mind before we make commitments and promises. And the charges that we make as a council too need to be affordable. So that's where I would stop, just as a kind of reality check on my own list of wishes and wants, is to say, let's remember, people have got to pay for this. It's not coming out of my pocket or your pocket. It's going to come from the public who vote for us.
Mark Voller for Liberal Democrats, Robert Thompson for Labour, and Pauline from our island. That is right, isn't it? Make sure I got that right. Thank you very much. I think it's been a very collegiate discussion. I think it's been a lot of shared ideas, obviously a lot of commitment, enthusiasm for Sandown, which is great to hear. I will just finish off, because I missed off at the beginning by not pressing record, just to explain that IsleVote21 has been formed with the sole purpose of enhancing democracy by providing an unbiased platform for candidates. We have no affiliations or funding, and no candidates were aware of the questions that were asked. All 138 candidates in this year's election were invited, either directly or via group party leaders, so everybody had equal access to come along and take part. So with that, I will thank you. I'll stop the recording